SCGMD. Do these initials mean anything to you? If you grew up in the heyday of online Flash games, this is one of the most exciting combinations of letters there is. Right up there with NSFW and Rafflecopter. In a series of increasingly difficult rhythm games, your sense of dexterity and determination are tested, while introducing millions of players to a world of underground musicians. Go toe-to-toe against other acolytes of the axe, and shred indie punk rock riffs to become a copyright-friendly guitar hero. Starting out as a humble Flash dev teenager, all the way through to landing a publishing deal with Konami on his latest game. This is the history of
Super Crazy Guitar Maniac Deluxe 4!
How's it going, everyone? My name is Graham and welcome to Flashlight, a series where I look at the history and evolution of all things Flash related. Today, looking at the development and legacy of Super Crazy Guitar Maniac Deluxe and how that paved the way for this fully 3D spiritual successor, Super Crazy Rhythm Castle, a minigame rhythm puzzle adventure featuring over 30 songs, both local and online co-op, that is being published by Konami. That feels like a journey worth exploring. This series was developed by Rob Senkovich, or Shinki, as he was more commonly known on the internet in his teenage years. Rob was kind enough to respond to an interview, which I'll be featuring snippets of throughout. When asked how he got into game development, he shared that he was always better at science and math in school, and felt he lacked the creativity to make great art or music. It all clicked when I discovered that I could program games in Flash. It wasn't some cryptic thing that only professionals can do. I could use my nerdy brain to make something creative and fun. His earliest games were collaborations with artists from around the Newgrounds forums. Many of those never saw the light of day. And as with many of us in the Newgrounds scene, Rob idolized Tom Fulp and Dan Paladin, watching them bridge the gap from Flash gaming to consoles, as they seemed to just be effortlessly making all these fun things that had so much of their style in them. Rob also cited the works of the Super Flash Bros and JMTB02 as aspirational developers, raising the bar in the browser gaming space. Interestingly enough, all the developers mentioned here are not only still out there creating epic new games of their own, but they all very recently have something new to share. The Behemoth just put out Alien Hominid HD and Alien Hominid Invasion. JMTB02 just put out the Elephant Collection, compiling and remastering 10 of his most popular elephant-themed Flash games, and the Super Flash Bros just released a demo for their upcoming Crow Country. And now this is a little tangential, but while I'm out here hyping up old Flash devs, Oliver Joyce, the man behind Swords and Sandals, also just dropped a demo for his upcoming Gorgon Shield, published by Two Left Thumbs. This arcade-like, party-based roguelike RPG is slated for release next year, and with a demo finally ready to share publicly, we're eager for feedback. In case you're riding high on Flash game nostalgia, I'll have links to all of those games down below, so be sure to try some killer new demos, and to either buy or wishlist any of the games that win you over. Back to the subject at hand, looking at the games that Shinki did release, he managed to work with a different artist on each and every game, whether that be Nightmare Kingdom, Halloween Hoodlums, or the relatively popular Time Assault. However, none ever came close to his crowning series. I still remember trying desperately to get perfect scores, smashing the keyboard in a hypnotic frenzy, getting in the zone, letting your instincts take over and guide you through the notes, only to then totally fumble it when there's an abnormal bit of charting right at the end of the song. And when I say smash the keyboard, I mean smash it as loud as I dared while trying to make the teacher think I was doing the typing exercises she assigned. The original came about because I was working with an artist who suggested we make a rhythm game. He pulled out, but I'd gone ahead and figured out how to code this basic rhythm game. And there just so happened to be the first ever developer contest held on flashportal.com, with a deadline just 10 days away. There were no constraints or boundaries provided, just that submissions had to be an original, never-before-released game. As a fun aside, Sky Boys, the founder of XGen Studios and overall Flash game legend, was a guest judge for this contest. Racing to meet that deadline, I found some awesome music on Newgrounds and put in a little red sticker Stickman. I gave it the guitar twist because I was just starting to learn guitar myself. Digging up this little tidbit of information about the development contest was actually a weird blast from the past for me. There were $10,000 in available prizes, and I actually tried to make a Stickman game of my own for this very contest. I paired up with a friend and frequent collaborator, Pelamis McSoy, based on his comic world of DeRose. We ended up not finishing it in time for the deadline, or ever, actually, but there is a lot of completed work on it that I wouldn't mind showing off. Maybe someday I'll do a special video on my Lost Flash epic Bill's Quest. I may do so just because, for the self-indulgent enjoyment of reflecting on old unreleased works. Through my own relation to that contest, it was really cool to stumble back upon the old website and see that Rob actually earned 4th place and won $900 through this contest. Humble beginnings for a series that went on to earn millions of plays worldwide. Rob is fairly certain he fittingly spent those earnings on an Epiphany SG, the very same unlockable guitar seen in the eventual sequel. If you're curious about the rhythm gaming context of the time, as I was, the original Guitar Hero released back in November 2005, and we got the first Super Crazy Guitar Maniac Deluxe in May 2006. He hadn't even heard of Guitar Hero until after his own game was released, and someone pointed out the similarity. Rob shared that he then sought out the games for himself and had a lot of fun playing them. My only real touchpoint rhythm game at the time was Dance Dance Revolution, so whenever I described the game, I'd say you hit in time to the music like DDR. I'm okay at rhythm games, but when it comes to really mastering the harder stuff, I hit my limit and get demotivated. The game is presented in a rather unconventional frame size. I'm always a sucker for Flash games with oddball frame dimensions, and this one is wide and narrow, keeping the focus primarily on those horizontal bars across the top. For such a quick turnaround, a lot of would-be staples of the series are already present in this initially Game Jam-sized entry. We have our little red stick figure who rocks out when we play. There are both amateur and pro settings, but rather than affecting chart difficulty, it determines whether or not your combo fully resets on a mistake or is simply deducted from. The game makes use of both sides of the keyboard with both arrow keys and the A and S inputs. The soundtrack is composed of songs with primarily rock, punk, or metal influences, all with an emphasis on guitar, even if there are only 2 songs. And what's happening on screen is very limited. It's a pretty simple introduction to the concept of a Flash-based guitar rhythm game, laying the groundwork to be built upon in future games. Looking back at the development of the series, Rob shares, "There are a million ways it could have been a better game, but then it wouldn't be Super Crazy Guitar Maniac Deluxe. It wouldn't be that strange, raw experience it is with the awesome amateur music and the Stickman. I like it how it is." I think something that was done really well right from the first entry, even though the art is rather basic, is the design of the scrolling inputs. Their distinct shapes and colors make it very readable at a glance, even for the colorblind. An interesting choice here is that your window of forgiveness for hitting a note is wider at the beginning, and the better you perform, the more that shrinks down. It's a really great way to have the difficulty scale on the fly, yet it doesn't exist anywhere else in the series. It was fun on paper, but I realized that the window size was better left alone and just tuned to a sweet spot. When the window is too wide, you're accepting inputs that aren't really in time. And when the window is too narrow, it can feel unfair. It seemed better to just keep it consistent and challenge the players in other ways. I never really liked when rhythm games reward you more or less points for how close you hit. I prefer to say you either hit it or you didn't, so I stopped messing with that window. The original title wasn't really a hit in its own time, and without the Flash Portal contest, might never have been made, let alone leading into a full series. It was so clunky and only had 2 songs. The guy who ran the Flash Portal contest really liked it and suggested I make a sequel with more songs. He did a lot of Stickman stuff and we talked about maybe working together on it, but I decided to go for it alone. Not before making the silly and incredibly short Super Baseball Maniac Deluxe, a project made for the Boredom minigame collab on Newgrounds that never saw the light of day. In this game, you simply mash inputs and try to get the highest possible total distance. There are two things of note here. It instead uses a white-based stick figure with a colored outline design not seen elsewhere in the series. And it introduces this top hat wearing purple stick who eventually gives you the tutorial in the fourth game. A little over a year after the first, in August 2007, we saw the release of
Super Crazy Guitar Maniac Deluxe 2.
And right from when you open the menu, we are introduced to the now trademark title announcement done by Edwin Tion. Rob knows that he found Edwin online, but doesn't actually remember where. Yet his voice became a staple of the series. He was always super pleasant, and I think he was pretty shocked when I came back to him years later for number 4, but he was happy to make all the weird noises I requested. This menu music is much more furious and guitar forward, which gives it that Super Crazy Maniac feel. To some, this is still seen as the peak of the series. There is so much in this game that Rob just got perfectly right. His overall design sensibilities clearly took a leap forward, and the balance of fast songs with a more approachable difficulty made it very widely popular. The input options now boast 7 keys with the addition of D, split across 3 lines and 2 tracks, which greatly improves readability. These indicators are bright and clear, being displayed on a condensed but visually unobtrusive fretboard. This focus of design and ease of gameplay are what kept me coming back to this installment over and over. When returning to these games to record footage for this video, I didn't expect how well I'd actually remember all of these songs. A handful in the later games remain familiar to me, but hot damn, I must have put a lot of hours into this second one, because they all came flooding back to me. One fan asked to hear more on the song selection process for these games. It was initially just about what I liked the sound of and what I thought was cool, and sometimes that was pretty raw sounding stuff that other people really didn't like. As time went on though, I think I got a sense for what's a good rhythm game song. You internally ask all these questions like, does it have interesting melodic sections? Is it too repetitive? Is there a fun solo? Does the song take you on a journey? Is there a particular riff that would just be so satisfying to play along to? These days, I can skip around a song for just a few seconds and know if it's going to be worth considering. When first starting to look and building up that set list, I'd try to find just some really awesome tunes that sort of set the tone of the game for me. Something I love, I think others will love and will be fun to play. As the track list fills out, I consider things like, what could I look for to add variety to this list? Are there any gaps in terms of simpler songs or more complex songs? And come the fourth game, I started pushing the boundaries and I'd look for fun curveballs like Hole in the Ground or Toys and Us. After starting with just 2 songs, this sequel has a respectable 14 tracks, split between amateur and pro. The game actually launched with 16, and of those, 6 were amateur only, 6 were pro only, and there were 4 that could be played in either difficulty. Pretty shortly after launch, 2 tracks needed to be removed. Don't Want It to End and Dying for You, both originally created by the band Embodiment, then illegally uploaded to Newgrounds by a user who was taking credit for both tracks. Without proper song use permissions, they were removed from Super Crazy Guitar Maniac Deluxe 2, and that user was banned from Newgrounds. I'm gonna have to figure out a workaround to saying the full name each and every time. One addition I really enjoy is seeing your little guitar buddy rock out harder and harder the better multiplier you achieve. A burning question I had was whether or not this little red rock star had either an official or internal name. We mostly call him Guitar Maniac, but I decided his canonical name is Maurice. This time around, the game is no longer about just getting the high score. You're trying to get the best star score, aiming for a bronze, silver, gold, or perfect star. By earning star rankings and perfects, you can unlock different guitars for your little in-game avatar to play. Each guitar adds a cool, unique flair when you hit the notes correctly, although I found some of these to be quite distracting, often making it more difficult to play the game. And somewhat ironically, the one named after the developer is one of the hardest ones to play with. With each song only being a minute or two each, it was a perfect game for stealing away a few minutes of time during your computer classes, where you and a buddy could open it up to play a 90-second song, seeing who could get the better score, then quickly tabbing out to finish whatever boring typing exercises we were supposed to be doing. My finger placement on keyboards may be sloppy as hell to this day, but I can still perfect every song in this game. So now who was wasting their time, Miss Cliff? Less than a year later, we got SCGMD 3. SCGMD? Does that actually save time? That's not better. I don't know.
Super Crazy Guitar Maniac Deluxe 3!
Anyways, the game came out in April 2008 and was a whopping 9 megabytes. Yes, there was a time where a file size of only 9 megabytes actually took time to load. Again, boasting a list of 14 songs, some of which were now actually 3 to 4 minutes long, it tends to drive up the file size a little, even when the audio quality is largely crunched into oblivion. For a little context, most Flash games made a concerted effort to stay below 5 megabytes, which was quite often the file size of just a single song, let alone an entire game filled with music. By this time, many Flash portals had moved beyond that 5 megabyte limit, but making something larger than that could risk limiting your game's exposure, as it couldn't be featured on every website. Obviously, it paid off in this specific case. Those painfully slow internet speeds of the time led to funny little inclusions, like a list of things you could do while waiting for the game to load. This game was sponsored by Not Doppler, and Rob considers it his first real taste of success. It was the first time I had decent visibility on the number of plays, and also the first time I'd get a share of some of the ad revenue the game made. Seeing it take off and the number of plays in the millions, I couldn't really believe it. YouTube was on the rise then, and I'd put a contact form on my website too. So seeing all these fan emails and seeing videos pop up of people playing, it made the work so worth it. There's quite a few quality of life improvements over that sophomore installment. The notes move across the screen much more smoothly, with much of the choppiness and stuttering seen before now being barely noticeable. Looking at the game's review history, this seemingly became less of a problem through the game's lifespan, actually often running better on more modern machines. There's now a guitar plink sound whenever you make a mistake, and the music goes quiet until you get something right again. There is the blessed addition of a bar on screen that shows how far into a song you are. This was very sorely needed, especially on some of those much longer songs. One of my favorite little micro additions is that our stick friend actually now moves his hands around on the frets as you hit the different keys. It's a small change and one you barely even have time to look at while playing, but I still enjoy it. While this game is generally seen as a step up in quality from number 2, not everyone enjoyed the jump up in overall difficulty. There are still the 4 arrow keys, but then again adding an additional holdable key, bringing those up to 4 as well. Although there is the option to set them as either ASDF or 1, 2, 3, 4. Having 8 keys spread across a greater vertical distance made things less cluttered and opened up more variety of key combinations. But it really stretches your peripheral vision and loses some of the charming simplicity the second game had. With the longer average song length, often 2 to 3 times longer than the last game, also went against the quick time killer appeal of many Flash games, and making the pursuit of perfecting each song a notably longer endeavor. While it missed out on some of the casual audience and more immediate short-term plays and replays, this game had a very strong staying power for the super crazy fans. Rob made a post in the congregate forums. Moving from 2 to 3, he made a few mistakes by changing things that a vocal few had asked for, and they ended up being bad decisions overall. I shared this excerpt with Rob, seeing what he thought about it now, given time and distance from these entries in the series and with the addition of a 4th title. Wow. I really remember that period and making that post, but I can't recall the specifics. I think it was around people wanting it to be harder. The passionate vocal ones were the ones playing it to death, and the majority who just enjoyed it for a bit of fun weren't saying anything. I've learned since that you have to be really careful about how you take feedback on board from any angle. In the end though, 3 was so popular that I think I accepted that the changes could stay, and I think in 4 I was just more careful about the difficulty ramp. A personal grievance of mine that I'm not certain others agree with is that I think the third game lost some of the style present in number 2's sleek simplicity. The arrow keys especially look rough. I prefer either the plain icons of 2 or the bright gradients introduced in 4, whereas these bland colors and heavy bevel effects just look kinda bad to me, especially when you have to look at 1,000 of them in a row. At the time of its creation, this was intended to be the final Super Crazy Guitar Maniac game. An unlockable guitar description hints that this was indeed intended to be the last installment. About half a year after its release in a Newgrounds post, Rob seemed confident a 4th game would not happen, citing a weariness with making rhythm games and dealing with copyright licenses. But as we know now, this story doesn't end there. Yeah, I said I'm bored of making rhythm games, didn't I? I always like to be doing something new, something different. I like to invent new ideas and solve new problems. So the idea of just finding more songs and doing it again with refinements didn't appeal. I think at the time I was actually scribbling ideas for a Flash RPG. Pretty last minute putting this video together, I found these archived images from Shinki's old DeviantArt page that is no longer active, with these teaser images for Sticks and Stones. I didn't have time to confirm, but I suspect they're tied to that Flash RPG in question. So how did Rob go from 3 hit Flash titles to founding his own indie studio, Second Impact? Rob was looking to grow in the indie space, and to make the same leap his idols like those at the Behemoth had made, moving from browser to console development. The success and quality of the Super Crazy series is directly credited as opening those early doors for him. I contacted every UK game studio I could find, and thankfully Mind Candy were really interested to have me spend the summer there and build a rhythm game, Underground Disco, to go in their Flash-based Moshi Monsters. I finished it in pretty good time working with their team, and then I made a few extra mini games for them too. With a growing resume of games and experience, Rob landed a graduate programming job at Black Rock Studio, who made racing games like Split Second and Pure. Having those old games on my portfolio was really valuable. He worked there for about a year and a half until the studio closed down in 2011. He and a new developer friend, Rowan, who he met at Black Rock, decided to start their own micro studio. This became Second Impact Games, which has since grown to 9 developers, with their first game having just released. More on that soon enough. Rob shared that Not Doppler, the sponsor of number 3, was so pleased with the game's performance that they came asking for a 4th game more than once, making a sizable offer, which in the peak of Flash development days could have easily been 5 figures. With several other ex-Black Rock employees spinning off their own indie studios, I looked back on that offer for Super Crazy Guitar Maniac Deluxe 4, and it gave Rowan and myself the confidence to start Second Impact Games, with a project to kick us off. I came up with the bosses and the achievements in order to freshen it up into something more than just the 3rd game again with new songs. It's crazy to think we started a company based on that. But I told myself if Second Impact Games didn't work out, that I'd start looking for another job. That was 12 years ago. Fans of the series had a long wait ahead of them. It was nearly 4 years later, in February 2012, when we finally saw the release of Super Crazy Guitar Maniac Deluxe 4. We can immediately hear that Edwin returned.
Super Crazy Guitar Maniac Deluxe 4!
Announcing that title at full force, occasionally belting out the game's lesser-known subtitle instead.
Rhythm Attack Assault Aerial Ascension Attack!
I'm a bit of an anime fan, and I was watching Gintama at the time, and I really liked the joke they did of a complex named thing which included the same word twice. Neo Armstrong Cyclone Jet Armstrong Cannon. So I pinched that and stuck attack in twice. Immediately, you can see the game has a much stronger visual identity. The charts are much more colorful, and our red friend at the bottom gets up to all kinds of crazy shenanigans. I love watching those fluid animations transitioning his actions forwards and backwards as you succeed and fail. There's a cartoonish sense of fun to the whole experience, right up to the wacky a cappella sound effects during a song's summary screen.
Golden.
Insert gender here.
This was the first time Rob had a direct collaborator on the making of one of these games. Rowan is a programmer, so he did the heavy lifting on the code side of number 4, meaning I could focus on the design, music tracking, and animations, etc. This all feels to me that they had more fun making it, and that the primary mission was for us to have fun playing it. There's an excellent level of variety in song choice, and I think the best and smartest addition is that any song can be played on both amateur or pro. Again, new songs are unlocked by accumulating star value, so being able to see your star rank while playing is much appreciated. Unfortunately, to make room for that, the song length tracker from the last game was removed. Rob reflected on one of his greatest challenges in making the series. I remember the tracking for Tired Old Man being a huge pain. I just couldn't get it right because the beats per minute of the song were a bit all over the place. A lot of amateur music isn't recorded with a click track, so you can't rely on a consistent BPM. But that song in particular was such a struggle to get right. I'd do it, test it, then convince myself notes were off, then change them back. It never felt quite right, even when we shipped the game. This entry saw the introduction of boss battles, which isn't something I would have ever expected from the series. In these, there is no score bar, and you instead do damage by hitting notes, with some bosses requiring a sustained combo to deal damage at all. Some of these bosses are encountered randomly, while others have specific summoning conditions. These 6 bosses include the Pizza Guy, a hilarious gag of a boss, the Puppet, the God of Pirates, the Brothers, the God of Time, and the Dark Guitar Maniac. Some of them have abilities to mess with the player, like covering a portion of the chart or making the notes all grayscale. When selecting a song, you may see the option to challenge a boss, which you can decline. One aspect of this I disliked is that it kept happening on new songs I'd never practiced and had 0 current star rank on. So I would either skip the boss to practice the song and attempt to earn a star, or I challenged the boss playing the song blind, and then either risking failure or performing incredibly well and not earning the star to show for it. That particular choice just felt a little at odds with the larger game to me, even though I really enjoy the bosses. There's even the cool ability to then challenge the bosses on any song at any time. I think I wish there were special songs that were specific to each boss to first introduce them, but that would have been a lot of extra work. After defeating each boss, they are added to the main menu splash screen, and you can play a new guitar themed after them. I really like the Pizza Man joke, but the brothers are my fave. Fighting them on Switch vs. Evil Dog and all the crazy disruptions they do and how cool the retro brother is, they're a great boss. They are so insanely difficult. They'll replace the icons you're familiar with colored diamonds, and you simply have to know if it's the arrow keys or numbers based on whether it's a single note or held. At other times, the other brother will flip your tracks around, so everything that used to be at the top is at the bottom, bottom's at the top, and when you get especially deep into the song, they start doing both to you. And it makes my brain hurt just trying to think of it. I so barely beat these brothers while recording for this video. Less directly punishing, but no less difficult, is the God of Pirates. As a fun thematic concept, you can actually only fight him at sea, which is a 3 or 4 times multiplier. So you have to keep constantly throwing away your multiplier, although it's very easy to overshoot, then you have to build it all the way back up from 1. At least you can spam additional inputs, which is easiest to do during long held notes. Without that option, I'm not sure I ever would have wore down the health of either of those bosses. I've been so busy talking about other things, I didn't even talk about the recurring presence of Evil Dog on these soundtracks. He's the famed creator of both the Punk-O-Matic series and Road of the Dead, among many other popular Flash games. That's another developer and series I'll have to do a retrospective on someday. By this time, the song selection process had been more refined. It came down to one of these 4 options: checking out music from people like Gukasan, Switch, and Evil Dog, who'd featured in previous games, directly asking them if they had anything new in the works that might fit the series. Some were through people I knew personally. My brother played guitar and was in bands. A couple of songs came from him, Eliminator and Stormfield. One of his old bandmates was the bassist in Dinosaur Dance Floor, and the Monicure song in the 4th, the lead singer was friends with a housemate. The biggest part, though, was exploring the Newgrounds audio portal, mostly for the 2nd, and places like MySpace and Bandcamp for 3 and 4. The Newgrounds audio portal has only gotten more advanced and easier to search in the time since, so I imagine it would be a lot easier now than it was back then. And when I worked on Moshi Monsters, they used a bunch of licensed royalty-free tracks. So for number 4, I also checked out royalty-free sites to fill in some of the spots as well. Reflecting on the soundtracks of all these games, I don't think I could pick a fave from each, but Guitar vs. Piano was always special because it came with me the whole way, from being in the first game to being the super hard unlock in 4. While I think the 2nd game had the greatest mass appeal and the 3rd was perhaps the most challenging, the 4th game feels that it is the most well-rounded experience. There's a lot to see and do here, as well as a plethora of achievements, which if earned in grouped rows, will unlock other goodies. So if you're looking for more of a full gaming experience rather than a short time killer, then I think Super Crazy Guitar Maniac Deluxe 4 is the best in the series. It's somewhat interesting seeing the number of plays the series has on a site like Newgrounds. I'm not sure if this is the result of growing series complexity boxing out players, or if it can be chalked up to the same genre saturation that killed Guitar Hero. Likely, the browser gaming landscape was simply drying up at the time and games weren't as readily pulling millions of views. This was originally one of the first Flashlight videos I ever made over 5 years ago. I was new to scripting videos, it was on a different channel, and there was no interview with Rob. But back at that time, I had found some early hints at Second Impact's new project. As early as January 2018, they had a tease on their website. Super Crazy Guitar Maniac Deluxe fans rejoice. We're working on a new Super Crazy rhythm game, but it's not what you'd expect. It's really exciting to now know they were teasing Super Crazy Rhythm Castle, but through my chat with Rob, I was thrilled to get an insider scoop on a direct successor to Super Crazy Guitar Maniac Deluxe that was planned but never came to fruition. I've never revealed this before, but we did make some initial ideas for Super Crazy 5. Sort of a sequel, but dropping the guitar focus. Unfortunately, there is no footage to share, but Rob was kind enough to send along some basic concept art for the characters and game, as well as some of what they had in mind for that project. It featured a band of stick figures, and there was a mechanic where you'd swap instruments at certain points in the song. You'd be playing the guitar, and it would say, "Vocals are coming next," but you could cycle that to pick bass next instead, charting your own path through the song. It was really fun and allowed me to track the most interesting instruments at each part of the song. The game revolved around the idea that you're getting this band back together who have been imprisoned by this evil guy. You'd work your way across a map, unlocking new songs and fighting bosses. There was a fiery orange vocalist who you had to save from hell, an icy blue bassist who was frozen in the mountains, a chunky green drummer, and obviously a red guitarist. You'd meet Satan, and he turned into a giant demonic guitar that you used to fast travel. We actually showed the prototype to Sony as a possible Vita game. We prototyped it by attaching an Android phone to a PS3 controller, since we didn't have access to dev kits. I don't think they had a clue what Super Crazy Guitar Maniac Deluxe was, though. I want to share a slice more about Second Impact's history building up to Super Crazy Rhythm Castle, as it paints a really incredible indie success story. Second Impact Games has been around for 12 years, yet they are only just now releasing their first fully fledged title. After founding the studio on the Super Crazy series, they then spent approximately 7 years working on titles for other studios. Whether that was freelancing on other projects, building mobile prototypes, porting titles, or creating apps to support other games, Second Impact Studios kept themselves continuously busy. Lots of their contract work was tied back to people they met working for BlackRock Studios. That dissolution led to a community of startup studios, all helping each other when and where they could. Many of those relationships are still going strong today, picking each other's brains to get external feedback on upcoming projects. I just love the indie game community so much. We always wanted to make our own games, and a lot of the time we had something on the back burner. We were always cooking something, but that doesn't pay the bills unless you get a buy-in from a publisher or swing a home run. Some of their own work from those early years include smaller projects, like Super School Day, a choose-your-own-adventure driven by quick-fire minigames, or Cisco's Net Invaders, a tower defense game with a cybersecurity edge, or FON, another supposed tower defense game that I actually couldn't find any real info on. Speaking to the studio's early days and growth working on other projects, Rob shared, "The sad lesson is, it's brutally difficult to claw your way into making your own games of a decent scope. Some people succeed by doing it themselves at home, living on a shoestring, maybe working a job on the side. In that way, you can do it with very little budget, but once you have a team, a studio, all the gear, you need money just to keep that all moving. Unless you're sat on a fortune, which we weren't, or you know the right people, which we didn't, it's so hard to get things to happen." They first conceived of Super Crazy Rhythm Castle back in 2016, with development beginning as a trickle alongside contract work. The aim was to build something fairly small and to release it digitally on the PSN and Xbox stores, to be seen as more than just mobile devs. They started pitching the game back in 2018, but ended up building a larger portion of the game and trying again a few years later. It certainly started simpler than it ended up, but it was never a pure rhythm game. The idea was to use the Super Crazy style rhythm track as the backbone of something more varied, more approachable, and more super crazy. Rob considers this game his baby, describing his own role as control freak perfectionist, programming the game's initial core, designing most of the levels, and writing all the dialogue. Once funding was available and the team was expanded, he became much more hands-off. Building off his old rhythm game development experience, but looking to create something new, the idea became to make a multiplayer experience that functioned closer to minigame escape rooms, all centered around the music. Originally, it was supposed to be very visually simple and the rooms very basic and similar to each other. The idea just ballooned far beyond the initial remit into something really wild and amazing. Rob cited a few rhythm games with wacky edges to them like Guitar Man and Parappa as being a greater influence on this title than something straightforward like Guitar Hero. On the non-rhythm side, a big one is escape rooms, and that sort of overcooked style multiplayer experience. It's something of a love letter to many video games, taking cues from Mario 64, Monkey Island, Game Boy Zelda games, and the king is a little bit Robotnik/Gruntilda too. Second Impact had pitched to smaller publishers, but never found a good fit. They wanted to contact larger publishers, but many of them don't offer public contact information. Then I found an interview online where a blog was chatting to someone from Konami UK, and they were saying, "We're taking pitches from smaller Western developers." They literally pasted his email into the blog post for people to reach out, so I emailed our demo over and they loved it. And really, it's a dream come true, because not only did we get to make the game I'd envisioned, and get the backing of a rhythm game powerhouse, we also got to put some Konami music into the game. I've always absolutely loved Bloody Tears from Castlevania, so to be able to track that song for our game was so special. Super Crazy Rhythm Castle is available now on PC and all consoles. The game features over 30 tracks, including earworm rock, hip-hop, dubstep, and plenty more. If you choose to play in co-op, players can play at differing difficulties, or your buddy can opt out of the rhythm section entirely to instead focus on the puzzles. It's a very fun and flexible experience for all skill levels to play together. The game is oozing with charm, and it is an end-to-end delight for all ages. I'll have links to that down below, alongside many other things at this point, and I'm pleased to be able to tease that Second Impact has already begun work on another title, Project Hydra, something that's being kept under wraps for now. So their future is looking bright. Super Crazy Guitar Maniac Deluxe was one of the first rhythm game successes on the internet, striking a chord with players early on with fundamental building blocks that persisted across all 4 entries. Whether they know it or not, modern browser-based rhythm games owe a lot to this series. It's incredible to think that after 18 years, a teenage Shinki is now living out his dream of making the leap from free online Flash games to a full console release, with Konami backing them to boot. I believe this series definitely earned its place in Flash gaming history, and I hope this story is as inspirational to up-and-coming developers as the likes of Castle Crashers were to Rob all those years earlier. As for the future of the series, maybe, if one of our games did really well and we had the resources, I'd love to put something together and put it out there. Or maybe when I retire in 30 years, that'll be how I spend my days, throwing together tiny little games again. You can still find all of the Super Crazy Guitar Maniac Deluxe games online, with Flashpoint being one of the most reliable ways to play them. Super Crazy Rhythm Castle is available in basically every storefront, so be sure to go check that out and to follow Second Impact Games. And hey, while you're at it over on Steam, don't forget to check out the demo for Gorgon Shield. While it's not built to be rhythm-based, the timing and control of rotating that ascending platform actually has an inherent timing to it that fans of this series might enjoy. And one more message from Rob: the fans I heard from were always so awesome and nice, so just thanks for liking my stupid little fun game. Making these flashlight videos is among my favorite things I do here on the channel. It's such a thrill to be able to talk directly to indie game development idols of my own. I know people are gonna ask where Madness Flashlight Part 2 is. I very recently made a community post talking about that, so hopefully that'll be back on track soon enough. Thank you all so much for watching, and I hope to see you all again soon.